Hello, everybody, and welcome to Virtual Pig Week. I'm Amy Quinn. I am a specialised pig advisor, and I'm based here in Teagasc Park. So I suppose over the past number of weeks and months, we've been putting together quite a technical schedule for the next 4 days to produce I suppose, an event specifically, I suppose, tailored mainly for pig producers. We're also using a conference platform this year, so we advise you to make the most of it. So you'll see the question and answer screen that's up there on your right hand side. So I would say, ask as many questions as you want over the next 4 days to all our presenters and our panels, just to really get involved with the event. I also just want to, I suppose, draw your attention as well to something quite new for us. We have an expo area on this conference platform, and this expo area um, has an area for each of our postgraduate students. So if you go to the expo area anytime over the 4 days, you will see that each student has created a video, and in this video they talk about themselves and their research projects. So this is a really good way, I suppose, to find out what's happening in the pig development department research wise. I suppose also over the next 4 days, we planned a different topic each day. So today we're going to talk about the Teagasc Pig Research Facility, and I'll come back to that more in a minute. But then on day 2, we are going to look at wet feed systems. So this day is going to be hosted by Louise Clark, and or by Jeremy Cutchin and Emer McCrum, and they are going to host Hoos Leighton. He's a private consultant feed specialist, and he's going to focus on wet feed systems in particular, on the areas of quality assurance and feed delivery issues. Then on day 3, this is going to be hosted by Louise Clark, and this is said to be, I suppose, a really, technical and engaging day for everybody. Where we're first of all going to meet Pater Lawler. He's our researcher here, and he's going to talk about, I suppose, the background to milk supplementation systems in the farrowing house and some of the research that we've been conducting here and plan to do now that we have a system installed. Then following on from that, we're going to meet Kieran Keane. So Kieran Keane is a research technician here in Moorpark, and he's going to go through some of the details on the system we have installed here in Moorpark, and then some more key technical components of systems in general. Then after this, we're delighted to welcome 2 pig producers who have systems installed on their farms. So that's Colin Ryan, who's farming in Clare, and Leanne Lynch, who manages the farrowing rooms for Jimmy Mooney up in Donegal. So we're delighted to have them, and they're going to share, I suppose, the reasons why they decided to install a system, and also some of their top tips about running the system, some teething issues they may have had, and also any advice they'd have for anybody who's installing the systems. Then finally, on day 4, Kieran Carroll is going to host a panel discussion. So I suppose and this panel discussion is going to be on topical issues. So to get the ball rolling, our own Edgar Garcia Manzanilla is going to talk on the upcoming ban of zinc oxide. So he's going to present some of his research results as well here. Following that, we're going to have Peter Duggan from Borbia, who's going to talk about the pig markets, and he'll be followed by Cormac Healy from Meat Industry Ireland, who'll talk about the current slaughter capacities here in Ireland. After this, we'll move to a panel discussion where we'll also be joined by Roy Galley, and we'll talk about these issues, and I suppose more issues, whatever comes in from the Q&A as well. So if we go back to today, just to let you know what's happening today. So we're going to be joined by Tomás Ryan. So Tomás manages a farm here, and also Aisling Holmes, a research technician on the Teagasc Pig Research Facility.
Okay, so welcome to the Teagasc Pig Research Facility, and here in what is day 1 of Virtual Pig Week. So for this year's video, we thought we'd base it here in the facility, really, and I suppose, and give a good run through, really, I suppose, of the sow throughout her entire journey, really taking her from weaning now, which is here we are in the service area of the Moorpark Pig Facility, right through gestation and into the farrowing house. And we thought we'd kind of culminate the journey then maybe with a little focus on the data within the farrowing house, and maybe some piglet weights and things like that.
So touching on what Tomás has said there, when we did our pig conference here last year, we talked about our productive figures, and one of those figures we chatted about was our farrowing rate of 96%. So we had a 96% farrowing rate for the quarter that happened just prior to the conference, and we ended up with a 91% farrowing rate for the whole of last year. At the moment, we're currently in line to be hitting that 91-92% farrowing rate for this year, which is satisfactory results for the unit. Based on those figures, we actually got in quite a few questions from farmers asking us how we were achieving those rates and what we were doing differently. That's why we decided to base these videos on the productive side of the unit, give you a glance at how the sow moves in our unit from weaning into service, in through gestation, and then back out into the farrowing house, and see if there's any tips and tricks that we can help you along the way with.
So I suppose just to recap on the facility itself, for those who aren't familiar with the unit here in Moorpark, it's a 200 sow research facility. We operate a 3-week batch system, so our sows are farrowing every 3 weeks, and I suppose we have one real task assigned to each of those 3 weeks. So farrowing is 1 week, then weaning is the next week, and then serving is the next week. So I suppose there's many benefits to that from a labour efficiency point of view for smaller units. Certainly units like ourselves at 2, 3, 4, 500 sows, the batch system is a very kind of labour efficient and labour friendly way of working, and it really does, I suppose, allow you to kind of concentrate on one specific job for that week and to do it to the best you can. So moving back from that and looking at the facility kind of from a higher level, I'll just give a background of some of our production and performance numbers. I would normally give these in kind of the monthly updates, so some people might be very familiar with them. But our typical farrowing batch is about 28 sows. Our born alive year to date is just a little over 16. Typically we're weaning about 13.5 piglets out at an average weaning weight of about 8.3 kilos. We wean then into our weaner accommodation. They reside there for around 6.5 weeks. We're transferring then over to our finisher building at around 33 kilos, and our typical average stay time in the finisher building is about 11.5 weeks. So our sale weights year to date, our carcass information is a little over 90 kilos dead, and I suppose our targets or our metrics across the sow herd would be in excess of 2.5 tons of pig meat per sow per year, and that would translate in around to say 29 pigs sold per sow. So our farrowing rate here in Moorpark is around 91%. Forecast maybe to go a little bit higher in the last few months of the year. So I suppose really the focus of this year's video is really around looking at the individual tasks that will sum up to kind of culminate in this kind of farrowing rate. So here we are starting at the start, kind of chronologically speaking. So the service area, we have 2 banks of stalls here, 17 on my left, 17 on my right. So as I said, we have about 28 sows in each batch. So this allows us to put in a few gilts, we'll take out our culls, so keep our number of services around really the 30 mark, and we have some little bit of spare accommodation. So I suppose the sow that's presented to you here at service really is coming from the farrowing house just after being weaned, and body condition really I suppose is one of the biggest factors you're looking at here. Obviously you can't do anything about it at this point, but you can really take the information you have now to affect future performance. So that's kind of where this video will go on that journey, looking at the sow in gestation and into the farrowing house and getting that sow back into these stalls next time in a better body condition if you feel that body condition is something that's deficient at the moment. So another factor that sits alongside body condition quite well is back fat. We would have a back fat meter here in Moorpark, and it would be normally used for research work as another kind of parameter that we'd measure. But it is quite interesting to see how the two really align. So your body condition, your back fat and your body weight are all really one. So it is fair to say that a lower body condition will result in a lower back fat, and a higher body condition, higher body weight, a higher back fat. This is really telling you the story, I suppose, of the sow's journey through lactation. And if a sow is having to mobilize a lot of fat off her back and utilize that energy to produce milk for the litter, I suppose that is an area then really that needs to be focused on and addressed for weaning and into gestation and future farrowings. Okay, so one example of this is we thought it would be interesting really to just kind of show a sow, two sows, a kind of we won't say extreme body condition states, but thin and fat, and kind of overlay this then with a measurement of back fat to show, I suppose, to give farmers out there and people who are working with sows, I suppose, a visual interpretation of what the back fat level might be in sows of a certain body weight or also of a certain body condition. Of course, scales, if you have one in your facility and you can weigh your sow pre-weaning, post-weaning, it is of a great benefit. But if you don't have a scales to hand, there are other methods of kind of obtaining an assessment of body condition or body weight. One method that can be used is literally to measure the girth of the sow, which is a kind of a circumferential measurement of the sow at her widest point. And there is an equation that has been developed, certainly in use here in Moore Park, developed over the last number of years, that will result in a specific kind of body weight range for a sow of a certain measurement.
Some of the basic points that we have highlighted with regards to serving correctly and getting that farrowing rate as more efficient as possible is timing. So bringing your boar in at the same time each day during that service period. For us here, it's around the 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. then in the evening time, and this allows the service time and everything to just work that bit more efficiently. Another factor in bringing up the service is using service aids. Using these at the time that the sow is interacting with the boar, touching noses or talking, is really good and gives you a better indication if that sow is standing in heat and ready to be served. And lastly, from our side, having a really good stockman doing the servicing, knowing what is happening on the ground, being able to detect the different areas of heat, and knowing when to serve and how to correctly mind the AI when it's on site is huge. So for us here in the unit, our serviceman and running this side of the breeding building is John Condon, and he's going to briefly talk to you now about his tips and tricks for this.
Hi, my name is John. I manage the service area in Teagasc Moore Park, and one of the main fundamentals that I look for in the service area, number one, is hygiene. So I always like to keep the service area as clean as possible, and I like to power wash the service area between batches. So number two would be boar contact. When I'm serving a sow or checking for estrus, I like to make sure that the boar is directly in front of the sow when serving. Number three, recording data. Now, we all record date, time, and the type of AI as well as the sow number, but options like, say, leakage or discharge displayed from the sow, I also like to record it and check back a month later when I'm doing my scanning. And number four, I also like to alternate my boars. So if I use one boar in the morning, I'll always use a different boar in the evening. And also from the side I will start serving, I will vary from day to day, come in and start serving from the other side. And my fifth and final point is that I never ever squeeze AI into a sow or a gilt. I always use the aids such as the buddy or a sandbag and the boar in front of it. And I feel when you're using this, it should help the sow take the AI naturally.
So here in Moore Park, we run on a 3-week batch system. First week is farrowing, then weaning, and then service. So how our service lines up in that is our sows are weaned on a Thursday. They move in here into our service area, and we have a wean to service interval between 2 and 7 days. So what that means for us is between a Saturday and the following Thursday. What we're seeing with our data is 65% of our sows have a wean to service interval of 4 days. So that's the Monday of service week for us, and 25% more of those sows then are served on day 5, which is the Tuesday. So the bulk of our services happen here between the Monday and Tuesday in the service week, day 5, day 4, wean to service interval. How this correlates then back to our farrowing is we've an average gestation length of 115 days approximately. So we're farrowing here in the unit Thursday, Friday, our busiest days in correlation with the service. How our gilts and sows that have previously repeated and are scanned again fall in line with this system they go on ultrasound here in the unit for 18 days prior to the next batch being weaned. They stop the ultrasound on the Monday of weaning week, and then they tie in with that day 2 to day 7 of the sows weaned to line up with the batch and have them all served at the same time.
Okay, so now we're going to focus on the kind of gestation timeline in the sow. We look at that from a number of factors, both from, say, the management of the sow in the house, both from an animal point of view and from a research point of view. So to give you a little bit of background on the house that we're standing in now, there's 2 ESFs here feeding the main sow pool, which is about 120 sows, and then we also have a third ESF down the very end of the house, which would feed our gilts in first parity. So about 25 gilts would reside in that station. So looking at the ESF itself, each ESF here has a throughput of about 80 sows. So with 120, we comfortably have enough capacity for the sows to feed in the 24-hour period. The benefit of the ESF from a management point of view, really, I suppose, is that it allows the sow to feed individually and allows us really to monitor individual sow intake. It also has the added benefit of us being kind of, I suppose, assured of what the sow is actually eating in gestation. And I suppose within this really lies some of the benefits throughout gestation, because with the focus here on body condition and body fat and I suppose sow weight gain throughout gestation, this is a really important aspect and component for us to be able to guarantee that. And if we are increasing a sow's feed curve or her feed allowance, to know that she is actually getting that feed. So I suppose moving more to a research point of view, the stations themselves then would have some benefits over and above just normally feeding a sow. So each station would have its own inbuilt scales where we can record sow gestation weight gain throughout gestation or at different time points, but also the stations here in Moore Park would have the availability to feed a combination of even up to 6 diets to the sow throughout gestation. So from a treatment point of view, from the experimental side of the house, it gives us a lot of flexibility within this house. Another combination, I suppose, and another benefit to the ESF itself is the fact that we can draft sows out for various tasks. So be it early day heat detection, be it scanning, be it drafting for experimental reasons or for vaccinations or anything like that. It covers off a myriad of uses. So I suppose to recap on the benefits of this area, so it really is, the ESF is the ultimate tool really for guaranteeing individual sow feed intake, for monitoring intake and weight gain, and also it provides us a lot of benefits from a research point of view also.
So Tomás will have touched on the drafting capabilities of the ESF. The first one of these drafts that we will do is at 28 days when we bring the sows out to be scanned. We do this here in Moore Park at 28 days because we find the fluid-filled pockets in the uterus are larger and more visible for the stockman to be able to correctly scan the sows. Around this time as well, we scan by the 28 days because implantation is at 21 days, and this can be a very vulnerable part of pregnancy. By scanning after this, we know that the sows are pregnant or not pregnant. One of the key factors to take into account at scanning is your sows that are pregnant, but also your sows that aren't in pig. So one of the big things here is using those sows to either cull them or to use them and bring them back into the breeding herd. So we use our data here to our benefit and take all our performances from the sows and their history that we have up to date. And if it's a case that one of them scans not in pig, they're not straight out the door. So we don't have a hard line on culling here for our sows that show up not in pig when they're scanned. We would look at our data that we have on our sows, check their previous performances, check their history, and then use that to our advantage on which sows we'll give a second chance to or ones that need to be culled. The benefit of this we find is that by giving those sows a second chance and serving them again, we're utilising the sows that we have here on site rather than putting more energy and labour costs into bringing in a new gilt and getting them to the same part of gestation and the same parity. So from our data so far this year, we've had 16 sows that have scanned not in pig. 10 of those sows we have actually served once more. 5 of them have farrowed, big healthy litters, and 5 more are in various gestation periods at the moment and are due to farrow soon. They've all scanned in pig on their second time round. The other 6 sows, we did cull them because we felt they weren't beneficial enough to give them that second chance. So this would be beneficial for, say, a farmer of a small to medium-sized herd, 200 to 500 sows. The benefit of utilising the stock of sows that you have on site, giving them the second chance of service, rather than bringing in the gilt and bringing her up to the same parity, the cost benefit of this is something that can be used.
Okay, so moving along the gestation timeline towards day 90 into the end of gestation now, we'll focus again on maybe some of just the benefits of the ESF station. So drafting around day 90 for us is very important. Vaccinations are given out at day 90, plus from an experimental point of view, there may well be some other measures that have to be taken from the sows in order to quantify, say, body condition or growth or back fat levels at that time point also. So I suppose the other big advantage to the ESF at around that day 90 time point is looking at the feed curve of the sow, and we would really look to increase the nutritional intake of the sow at this timeline to obviously take account of the energy demand from the litter, and this is reinforced, I suppose, by high-born alive numbers at present and stuff. So it really, I suppose, allows us to guarantee that the sow is really getting the nutrition and the energy intake that she needs, to know that we are providing it and it has been taken in. So our baseline curve here in the house up until about day 90 from intake post-service is around 2.25 kilos a day of the current dry sow diet we're feeding, and then that would go up to about 2.65 at day 90 and continue on to drafting then at around 110. So that would be the last job that the ESFs will do for us here in this house, is drafting out the sows for pre-farrowing at day 110.
Following on from the 90-day vaccinations, the next time that we draft out the sows is at day 110. The sows come out from the dry sow house into their farrowing crates pre-farrowing. At this point, we individually weigh each of our sows to have that data on file for what their pre-farrowing weights are. One of the tools that we've started to use here to utilise this and make it a more efficient system is actually a wand. So the sow goes into her weighing scales. We use the wand then to sync up with the transponder on her ear. This syncs with the scales, gives us our weight, and she moves through into the farrowing crate. We do this for each one of the sows in the batch. This method is very efficient because then you bring the wand out into the office, sync it up with our computer, all the data is there on an Excel file to be able to be used and look through whatever way you want to do it. So to summarise, the main thing that we're saying here is to make sure that you're gathering all the data from the different areas that we've touched on. So from your ESF with your feeding curves, making sure that you're looking at your scanning and your vaccinations, putting all of this data together to be able to utilise it to make the best of the gestation period for your herd.
Okay, so here we are at the final stage of the journey now. So we're standing in one of the farrowing houses in Moore Park, and we're going to focus on the farrowing and the lactation part of the journey. So when we started this video in the service house, we were kind of highlighting, I suppose, the sow condition at weaning and the effects then throughout gestation on kind of improving that. And then when the sow comes in here, I suppose this is the portion really which will be responsible for the loss in that body condition and that body weight. So I suppose to give you a little background on the farrowing house routine we have here, the sows are fed dry feed in here. They're fed dry sow diet up until farrowing, and then they move on to lactation diet. The diet is fed twice a day up until 6 days of lactation, and then 3 times then out onto weaning. I suppose the feed curve that we have here then is fairly progressive, and we do kind of try to push ourselves quite hard in probably the early 10 or 12 days of the curve. Then it would plateau slightly, and then we would rise it on out. We do individually assess our sows on a daily basis against the curve from their feed in the trough. and I suppose see if there's potential for greater intake or whether a sow has to be cut back and kind of catch up on herself. So like, there will be little pockets throughout lactation where if you do have the time to really spend the time looking at the sow, there will be windows where the sow's natural, say, ability to take in more feed will be enhanced, and if you can capitalise on that, it's a good opportunity really to get more energy, more nutrition and more condition into that sow. The piglet side of things then, we're weaning out at 28 days. As I said earlier in the video, our average weaning weight here at Moore Park is 8.3 kilos. We have recently implemented a supplementary liquid system into 2 of our farrowing rooms. So we have 28 places with that system, and then the other 28 places that we have here as just conventional farrowing house places. So I suppose that's a fairly comprehensive recap of just the farrowing house and the fundamentals of it and how we operate it.
So Tomás would have told you we're in the farrowing rooms, and my main job here in the farrowing rooms is the data collection. From that, it's the cell cards. So I have a few different cell cards here to go through with you and explain how the data is captured in these rooms. So the first of which is even the colours. We have a different colour scheme here in the farrowing rooms. So depending what trial and batch is happening, we will have different colours on those cell cards. So for example, this trial was one of our students, Elisa, so all of her sows had a green farrowing card, and this one was from one of our students, Keely, and all of her sows had a blue farrowing card. And it just means that if there's different elements to their trials, the sows won't get confused, and stockmen won't get confused of the sows that they need to provide the different elements to. And one other colour that we have is red. So our red sow cards are only used for foster sows or cull sows that are going to be replaced or are being used as a foster sow until they're replaced and culled out of the system. This is very easy to spot when you walk into the farrowing house, and it just makes you more aware to look at those piglets and keep an eye on them, because the majority of that litter will have been fostered onto that sow and might need a little bit more care and attention. So the first card we'll talk about is this one. So what you can see here on the top of the card, we have the sow's number, we have the date that she's due to farrow on, the batch that she's in. So here we've about 200 sows and it breaks down into about 7 batches. It also says here the trial, so the student that's involved at the trial, what rep of the trial is happening, and the trial number. Then we mark if the sow's been induced or not. So our rule here at the moment, we're an average gestation length of 115 days. So we induce on day 114 for them to farrow down on day 115. We put in our date and time of induction, and then the start of farrowing. So this main part up here is to capture the data at farrowing. So you'll put in your date and your time when you check the sow and how many piglets are under her. So this sow was checked, and the first time there was 1 piglet, next time it was checked there was 4 piglets, stockman was happy that she was progressing along nicely, and then the next time it was checked she had 12 piglets, she was almost done, and in the end she ended up with 14 live-born piglets. So then down here towards the middle of the card, you'll see we have the date that she farrowed, the room she's in, the pen she's in, how many were live-born, dead-born, mummified, and the collective litter weight. We also put in here if the afterbirth has been seen and if the sow was handled or not. And this helps us to keep track of any sow issues that might happen in the 24 or 48 hours after farrowing, and if the sow needs to be getting any antibiotics if she was handled during that time. The bottom part of the sow card is basically, the focus is the piglets. So we'll have here a section if any piglets are fostered off, when they were fostered off, their tag number, the sow they went to, and on the bottom fosters on to that sow. And over here we'll have any piglet deaths, the day they died, their tag number, the weight that was recorded when they were dead, and the reason for their death. And at the very bottom there's a little comment section. So if the stockman is walking in through the farrowing rooms and he notices, say pre-farrowing, he'll do his checks of the sows and see what way the teats are, what way the sow's feet are,
just pick up on little things that mightn't be able to be done in the dry sow house, because the sow is being treated on individually, and you have that opportunity to really do a thorough check of her in the farrowing house, pre-farrowing. So in this case, the stockman came along and he saw that she was actually missing teeth. So he wrote down missing teeth and then 14 in brackets because she's 14 good working teeth. So depending on her litter size and if there's an option to foster on or off, this information can be taken into account then. On the very back of the card, at the very top, what we'll have is the sow's history. So this comes directly from PigChamp. So I will, after farrowing, I'll come in and I'll take all of this data, input it into our PigChamp, and it will form the information for the next farrowing. So when a sow has farrowed and we're looking at fostering, I'll have a look here at her history and see how many she's weaned in the past few farrowings, how many are available for her to then take on as fosters, what's her max capacity, and make it like somewhat of an estimated guess, but also informed guess. And then at this side we will put down here, so we individually weigh and tag all of our piglets that are born here in Moore Park. So they get their tag here, what weight they were at birth and their sex. If there's any defects, if any of them had splayed legs or anything noted really about the piglet that was different or out of the ordinary, we'll write this here as well. And that is the basis of our card. It really has A to Z of everything on the sow and the piglet in that farrowing period. So here in Moore Park, as a research facility, we record a lot of data that you may not see on other pig farms. So we record individual birth weights of all our piglets. We record different weights of them individually pre-weaning and all the way up until individual weights at weaning, depending what trial is occurring in the unit. So what I've done is gathered all of this data together and put it into some handy graphs so that we can look at this information and there's some interesting points to be taken from it. The first of these is a graph showing the average birth weights of piglets taken from a sample size of 2,000 piglets. And what I've done is broken down the different weights into typical weight categories that you might see at birth. So we have the first group less than 800 grams, then between 800 grams and a kilo, between a kilo and a kilo and a half, a kilo and a half to 2 kilos, and lastly anything born over 2 kilos. The graph shows the weights at 4 different time points: day 6 of age, day 14, day 21, and at weaning. Overall, it is showing us a typical performance of these piglets at the different age categories and how they perform in that pre-weaning period. So if we take a look here at the bottom of the graph, the first group that we'll see is the less than 800 grams at birth. So on average, you'd be thinking these piglets are going to be around 700 grams at birth. And what we can see here is from day 6 to weaning, they're actually gaining a kilo a week up until that weaning point. The next group is 800 grams to a kilo. So our average here between those is around 900 grams. And they're gaining approximately a kilo and a half a week up until weaning. The third group is a kilo to a kilo and a half. Now this group is the majority of the pigs that you're going to see when you're looking at your weaning weights. They're the pigs that will make up that bulk of the weaning weight that you get. They're kind of the more typical size pigs that you'll see performing. And they are gaining approximately 1.8 kilos a week up until weaning. And then we come to our final 2 groups, which are the bigger of the pigs born. So 1.5 kilos to 2 kilos, they're showing a gain of 2 kilos a week. And the last category, anything born over 2 kilos, averaging out at 2.2 kilos a week, and in the very last week they actually went up by 2.7 kilos a week. So one interesting point here is that between day 6 and day 14 there's about 200 grams of an increase between the different groups. So say between the piglets that are less than 800 grams, the average weight gain is 1.2. 800 to a kilo, the average weight gain is 1.4. The next group 1.6, and so on and so forth. And it keeps going up in those 200 grams of a difference between the groups. After day 14 until weaning, that isn't seen anymore. The piglets have taken on their weight themselves and they're thriving individually at that stage. There isn't a nice 200 grams that you can say is happening again. And the other thing to note here is the big difference is your weaning weights. So those piglets that are born over 2 kg are hitting on average the 10 kg at weaning, and down to our very bottom ones, the ones born below 800 grams, are hitting approximately the 5 kgs at weaning. So here in Moorpark we are seeing our average weaning weight coming out at 8.3 kilos. So what that means for us as a unit, we're getting average birth weights between 1 kilo and 1.5 kilos. So it is something to note at your birth weights. If your weaning weights, if you're getting a very high born alive, but maybe lower than 7 average weaning weight, the piglets being born maybe in that 1 kilo to 1.5 kilos or 800 grams to 1 kilo type range. It's just some information that you can look at your own herd and bring back in and see how it's performing. The next graph that we're going to look at is the birth weight comparisons of individual pigs. So what I've taken here is just a snapshot of some individual birth weights and how they play out until weaning, taking the average daily gain into account. So if we start with the pig on the very bottom of the graph, born at 0.57 kg, weaning then at 4 kg, this pig is showing an average daily gain of 130 grams. And if you compare that then to the two piglets towards the middle of the graph, who are both born at 1 kg, and their weaning weights are 6.83 kgs and almost 7 kg, or sorry, almost 8 kgs, the 7.95 kilos. Their average daily gain is 220 grams a day to 260 grams a day. So you can see the difference there playing out. However, there's always going to be some factors that are going to make a difference other than just the birth weight. So if we look a little bit further into the middle of the graph, there is two piglets born at 1.5 kgs birth weight. One has an average daily gain of 400 grams and the other has an average daily gain of 240 grams. They would have received the same supplementation here in the unit. One weaned out at 12.3 kilos and the other weaned out at 8 kilos. So when you think of this, the other factors that are going to come into play here is genetics. And this can have a huge difference on how your piglets progress through that pre-weaning stage up until weaning. So in a few of the farm update videos, you would have heard from Tomás talking about some of our super sows here that we have in the unit. And we actually had one sow that was able to produce an average litter weight of weaned pigs at 11 kilos. Just down to her. The amount of creep that was offered to that litter would have been the same as other litters beside her. And what we saw with these piglets was that they were typically ready and reaching the slaughter weight 3 weeks earlier than the same aged piglets in their group. And the reason that we're able to look at this kind of data is because we wean here by litter and we don't mix them when they get to the weaning stage and get to the finisher stage. So we're able to track those piglets all the way back to that super sow. And we just think this is it's just a snapshot of information to look at, but it is interesting to see how they compare and how it can change depending on what they're born at, what size they're born at, but also what genetically is happening with them. And there's always other factors that can be taken into account as well. Lastly, that brings us to the last page of graphs. So this page is actually quite busy, so what we'll do is look at the top left hand corner first, where we can see the average sow weights. This distribution here is based on the herd that we have in Moorpark, where our average parity age is 3.2. So what we're looking at here, and the part you kind of want to focus is towards the bottom of the graph, where you can see the orange line. And this is our sow at service. And our average sow weight here at service is 225 kilos. Now this is a good weight for us here as an average, and on the opposite side then, on the right hand side, you can see the comparison back fat scores. So in line with that 225 kgs, we have a back fat score of 13, which post weaning and just after service is a good level to be at, because what we're finding here with our sows is that gives them enough time to be able to get the adequate body condition back on and to be hitting 16 or more in the back fat scores, say towards the end of her gestation, and that will all help in with the subsequent farrowing. By doing this, we're helping, by being able to monitor our sows and see how they're performing, we're able to individually assess them and help them out to the best of our ability here, so that their performance in their next farrowing is at their best, and we're giving those piglets and the litters a stronger chance. So that brings us down here to the bottom graph on this page, and this kind of ties everything that we've talked about through all of our videos together, where you have the litter weight increasing during that pre-weaning stage and the sow weight decreasing. Our objective here is to get these two lines as close as possible towards the end of the pre-weaning stage without any detriment to either group. So we strive to get that balance so that we have a good litter weight of our piglets, on average the 8.3 kilos, but then our sows aren't coming out in a bad condition. What we're getting on average is around the 225 kilos, 13 body fat score, and at that point we're able to give them that supplementation and nutrition to get them back to a good state for their subsequent farrowings.
Hello everybody, and thank you very much to Aisling and Tomás and the farm staff for, I suppose, that comprehensive overview and just some really good tips there and some ideas maybe for producers. Just to say that those graphs there at the end, I think that they might have been grainy maybe for some people, but we will make them available on our expo area, and they'll also be made available online afterwards, after the event as well. I suppose we're going to do some questions now, because quite a number of questions have come through, and we have Edgar Garcia Manzanilla. He's going to join us for questions with Aisling Holmes. So we'll start off maybe with a question for Aisling, and just these are going to appear, I suppose, as they're all from Orla Canam, but she's just, I suppose, moderating the questions and putting them through the system. So Aisling, could you go through the body condition scoring and the back fat that you should be aiming for at the different stages, please?
Yeah, no worries. So for us here, we kind of hadn't touched on the body condition score directly in the videos, but it's all related back to the back fat and the weighing that we have throughout the videos. So ideally, you're kind of looking at that 3 to 3.5 when they're pre-farrowing, coming into the farrowing rooms. And ideally, you don't want it to be going too far below that when they're coming out at weaning either. If it was 3, 2.5, you can see on one of the graphs that we had there, our sows, our back fat average is 13, and they're kind of around the 2.5 when they're coming out on average. But that isn't too far below what we're aiming for, and it gives us that time still to get them back up to a decent level at service and back into gestation.
Okay, very good. Just another one for you, Ashley, actually. With piglets at 8.5 kilo weaning weight, is there any damage seen on the sows' teats that you'd notice?
Yeah, so we've seen, I suppose, our weights, average weaning weights have increased in the last year. And with that, we are seeing these bigger pigs in those last days. So say on the Monday, or we wean on a Thursday, and that Monday to Thursday, they're the key days that we're in there in the farrowing house, having a look at these sows and checking for any damage. We have noticed small teeth damage and little bites from the pigs. When they're that size, they can get frustrated at that time. So what we've started to implement is more kind of areas for them to bite on, more toys, and just different kind of enrichment for them in the pen. And another thing that we haven't put in just yet, but we're looking at, is increasing our creep feed sizers. The size of our creep feeders at that stage, so that they can take in more of this, and hopefully that is also an enrichment area for them.
Okay, so it is something you have to really consider, I suppose, with piglets
Yeah.
that size. Just to stick with weaning, just kind of a follow-up question. This one is from Laura Conlon. So, what weaning age are you at to get those kind of weaning weights?
So typically we're between kind of 27, 28 days weaning age. So the majority that are farrowing are on a Thursday, and 4 weeks later we're weaning on that Thursday. So yeah, it's average 27, 28, but there's always outliers to that. So we have seen pigs being weaned around the 26 days of age, and even up to like 30 days of age. But around 27 days of age is getting the 8.3 for us here.
Yeah, no, they're very good weaning weights for that age. Just another question, Ashley, to keep going at you. How often do you change the bores on the unit?
So typically around every 2 years. So we have one boar on site now who's coming up to that age at the moment. So we'll have to replace him soon enough, and the other boar is 1 year old. So we kind of try and have them at that different age, because there's different uniquenesses to the boars as they're getting older as well. The older boar will have that stronger smell that some sows will like more, and the younger boar is more he's more active, and he talks to the boars more, and he moves around them a lot more. So having that balance is really good.
Yeah, no, very good. Just to ask a question over then to Edgar. Edgar, Tomás said that the lactation feed curve was quite progressive. Can we have a bit more detail on this?
Yeah, it's something that we discuss a bit with Tomás, because it came out there. If like many people are actually in some other countries, they were feeding ad libitum from the beginning. So we were with a very, what we would say, a conservative curve. So starting very low and then not pushing the sow too much. But at some point we decided to go for a higher amount, and the sows are responding, and they're responding well. So we don't see any problem with that. So Tomás is tweaking that all the time, but it's progressive on that sense. I don't know if at some point we will be able to go into, let's say, ad libitum, but at least you can do that safely now, because with the number of pigs that you get and the sows that we have, they don't get problems in terms of not eating the second day or things like that. One thing that coming back to a question that Ashley had there, for the pigs that are 8.5 kilos and do the teeth damage and all that, this is a discussion of the whole management of the animal in terms of feeding and days and all that. Probably most of the farmers are seeing the longer gestations of the sows, and one of the consequences of, like, the sows are bigger, they eat more, they have that capacity, but at the same time the gestation is getting longer. So those animals, we were thinking at some point, should we extend the lactation of the sow, because the sows can respond in terms of eating more and producing the milk, but those animals damage the teeth. So we are weaning on a Thursday now. We're thinking maybe we should move the farrowing and the weaning to skip the farrowings that are happening now because of the longer gestation on the weekend, and instead of giving the sow the time that they can actually produce the milk, the longer lactation, just to move it on the week to avoid that damage, because that damage actually happens, but still giving the opportunity to the staff not to be on the weekend when they have so the whole package goes together. It's not that you say, okay, these animals are able to eat more, give it to them. It's something that you have to consider in terms of the whole, how you are managing the lactation up to the end.
Yeah, there's a whole picture there you kind of have to look at. Edgar, we might just stick with you for a question there as well. Can you see any benefit in using a transition diet, and what crude fiber level in your dry sow diet?
Yeah, well, in the transition diet, I'm a big fan of as many as you can in terms of not making these fast changes on the animals, because the animals, whether you like it or not, they are used to something. And so any transition, whether it is for the sows or for the piglets or whatever transition diet that you can use, it's a benefit. The fiber that we have now at the moment, we moved to a different level for a trial, but I think we are back to the normal one, which I think is 8% that we use normally in the diet, 8% of fiber. And that's worked well for us. You can go higher, you can go 10, 12 if you want, but that's what works for us. And the animals are, with an ESF, you always have this kind of line of sows waiting to go into the ESF and all that, but the sows, they create an order, and with that fiber, they're okay. So it's not really a big issue.
Okay. And Aisling, how did the staff adapt to a batch farrowing system? I suppose this is probably something that farmers maybe considering a batch farrowing system might wonder.
Yeah, they've adapted quite well to it here. I suppose before the batch system, everyone was kind of uniquely in their own areas and dealt with that area specifically. Whereas what we're seeing now with the batch system is everybody's getting involved, because there's that one task is the main event of that week. So if it's farrowing, or if it's weaning, or if it's service, and everyone's kind of getting a taster for all that's involved in each of those tasks. And as a team, I think it works better, especially we don't have a massive team here on site. We've enough that we're able to get everything covered off, and everyone is able to gel together and get the jobs done then.
Sorry. Just another question for you, Aisling, was really like the red sow card idea, and when and why did you decide to introduce these?
Yeah, so we introduced the cards, the red cards, about a year and a half ago, and it's very obvious when you walk into the farrowing rooms, when you can see a red card. It kind of strikes out to you very fast. And the reason behind that then is that we're able to just identify that this sow has the foster piglets on her. So ideally what will happen is this sow will be one that we're looking at that might be culled due to her production or her age, and we're just giving another bit of using her in the unit for another tiny bit before we cull her. So that red card, when we come in, we keep an eye on those piglets, and we can know how they're performing and if they need extra enrichment, extra creep, and what's going on around them. I suppose the main premise behind it is not to have too many colors going on in the unit at one time, because the confusion there can happen quite easily. So you will see in the video I'll have touched on, we have a green card and a blue card, but in a batch, the majority of the sows will have one color card, and then this red card will stand out against that, and it's very easy to spot it from there.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good idea that maybe people could maybe introduce on the farms, something quite visual that would kind of make a good impact. Just one last question. I might just throw it to Edgar maybe, or Aisling, whichever one of you want to answer. So how do your foster sows perform from both from a rearing of piglets capacity and then from coming back on heat and time from Roy Galley?
I can take that one there. So for us here in the unit, the majority of the sows, I'll have said it just there, that we are using as a main foster sow will be one that we're actually looking at to cull out of the herd. So it's not, we won't have to look at her then as a coming back on heat on time from that side at all, because she might stay in the farrowing rooms for a longer lactation. The new piglets are on her. And once she's performed that, then she will be culled. So when we're doing this, we're kind of looking at our sows that are nearing the end of their stage. So they're kind of towards that 6 parity age. And if we've more piglets there to be able to use on her as a foster sow, great. And then she's culled after that. So it works great for us here. The piglets we're seeing are doing really well. So say you have a sow that has the 18, 19 live born, and you have that extra capacity, it's brilliant to be able to use that farrowing cull sow, put them onto her, and then she's culled after that farrowing.
Okay, very, very good. We have time for just one more question. And Edgar or Aisling, whichever one of you want to answer. So what is the farrowing mortality? This is from Ryan Pollock. So Edgar, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I understand the farrowing mortality for the piglets. At the moment we are around 15, and it's actually, I don't know if Ryan is asking because of that, but it's actually the main worry for me for the unit, because we are performing well except for that bit there. So and you saw, I think that I took the notes here that the exact number that we were saying 16 born alive and 13.5. It changes from week to week, and some weeks are better, some weeks are worse. One of the issues there that is, I know very well, because it is a big issue in Spain, because we bring the gills from outside the unit. So, and that's the case in our unit. When you run out of a good source of gills, you have problems to stabilize the farm again. You have to get used to the new gills and get the right numbers and all that. So even when the sows are performing well and we can do the fostering and all that, there is an issue in the background for us as a farm that is bringing gills from outside. That is difficult for us to keep the census right, and you pay. That's something that often is not discussed in the farms, because you just say, okay, we will put more foster sows, or we'll do this, we'll do that. The census has to be right, and you have to have that graph in your background and say, okay, I'm not right with the census. And whether your politics or your policy in the farm is to remove the sows at 6 parity, which is not our case, or to keep them as long as they go, at some point you have to force some sows out and keep the gills going in, because we ran into a situation for a while where we didn't have a good source of gills, and we pay the consequences now. So I don't expect that we're going to be able to manage that until we get the census back to, and that's the cause of the mortality. And it's a very good question, because it highlights a background thing that you many times don't realize that is there.
Okay, yeah. So I suppose it's probably the main focus production-wise on the unit, I suppose, at the moment, for room to improve. With that, I say we're going to have to kind of call it a day with questions. If there are any extra questions, we can put a list together and put answers up on our website, just to make sure everything's covered. So I would just like to thank Tomás, Ryan and Aisling, Holmes, and also John Condon on the unit, and the rest of the farm staff, because it took a lot of work for them to put together, and we really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed it. I think it was really visual, and you got to see what's happening really on the unit. Also, just want to remind you to visit the expo area. So the students' videos there, they're all about 2 minutes in length, and nice and short and simple, and worth looking at, just to update yourself on the research that's ongoing, to meet the students. I'd also just like to thank John, Leamy and Anne Kane for their technical support, and Alice Maloney from PR here in Teagasc. These videos will be made available over the next coming days, so after each of the events. So we'll have to leave it there for today, because I know this is kind of a lunch break lunch break event. And Ger will welcome you tomorrow at 1 p.m. where he's going to focus on wet feeding. So thank you very much for joining us.